5 minutes starting now.
Afternoon. Thanks for not running away and heading back off up to wherever you live. Much appreciated. So this is a slightly different take on Agile, possibly, and really about how Agile helps an organisation, RDT, to get back to its sort of innovative roots. What starts organisations isn't money. It's really that sort of creative mojo to go out there, have an idea, work it through, deliver it, and be essentially entrepreneurial. And that's what RDT was in the early days. Three people sitting in a customer's site, developing a solution for them. RDT now is a company of about 120 people, and about 100 people. It provides policy administration systems to most of, or many of the big insurance companies in the UK. So typically an RDT customer would spend over £1 million on this, well over £1 million on this system, and it's at the heart of their business. So it's how they handle policies and so on from sort of beginning to end. So it's a product that sits at the heart of their customers' world. So quite an important product. What I'm proposing is that Agile provides both the conditions for innovation, but it also importantly provides some of the key mechanisms for innovation. So it enables innovation in those sort of two ways. I'm going to look at innovation from a number of different aspects, the different facets of it. Examples of how it helped on the people side, how we innovated for people, the technical side, the product side, and also on the way that they deal with their customers. So a bit about me. I come from a company called RippleRock, and we've been working with RDT for a couple of years. So we've sort of been with them pretty much the whole way along the journey so far. The main problem you've got with an organisation that starts innovative is that business as usual begins to clog up your machine. You know, you win your first client, and that's all great, and it's a great relief, and you get the sort of first influx of money. You win your second, you win your third. The business gets a little bit more complicated. Each customer starts to ask for customizations. You know, their business is subtly different from the previous ones. And by the time you get up to 10, 11, 12 customers, which is where they were when we met them, your business is effectively ground to a halt. The innovative part of it has. What sort of makes this a bit worse is that the BAU actually can generate quite a bit of money. So it's not something that you want to necessarily walk away from. It's quite seductive. You know, you've got this company of about, at this point, maybe about 50 people. You need to keep the lights on, you need to pay them. You need the money that you get from your BAU. But the BAU, we've now got in our code base, each customer has a different branch because that's the way they decided they were going to handle the complexity and the different requests. You've got a whole configuration nightmare. So each time you deploy to live, it's a very manual process with lots of configuration, lots of branching, and your business gets slower and slower. So into that, you know, what do? You can't, you know, everyone's wishing to be innovative still. You know, they were innovative, they know they're there, they've got insights. It's not that they've sort of made a conscious choice not to, you know, stay innovative, but BAU gets in the way. Not only that, the marketplace around them was changing rapidly. So compare the market, very sort of consumer-facing, getting lots of different quotes, and the whole idea that you know, people were bypassing the brokers. So not only has their innovation slowed up a lot, but the world outside them has sped up a lot and is changing quite a bit. So their customers are now asking for ways of working with people like Compare the Market and all the other sort of online insurance companies. Where RDT has got to now is they've doubled in size in 18 months. They've got 2 new product offerings, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail later. One of them does real-time quotes, very scalable on the internet, on the web, in the cloud, doing 700 a second or capable of doing that. they've got completely different relationships with some of their clients than they used to have. And I'll talk about that. They've also got these gorgeous new offices that it's quite interesting to see this part. They were going to have the offices in quite a sort of traditional way. One of our guys, Adam, who was in there talking to them at the time, showed them the pictures of the Spotify offices, and Mark, who sort of heads up RDT, sort of tore up the original plans and completely redid it. And you'll see that it's actually quite, it's designed around Agile. It's, each of these is a team room with different colours. Everything's glass, you can walk around it. It's very light and bright. All the sort of good normal practices. And it's a really pleasant place to work. There's plenty of breakout areas. And this is for a company that was really almost in a sort of subterranean, startup-y type of place in Kent. They're based down in Kent. So this, from a team point of view as well, this is a very sort of enlivening change, even down to the RDT colours on the football. So the way that RDT approached adopting Agile was a common way that when we work with companies, we recommend, which is to start with a Pathfinder team, a team of people that can be focused and start to learn as rapidly as possible. They tackled, RDT knew right from the beginning that they wanted to look at the whole end-to-end process, how they engaged with customers through to how they deployed into live. So this wasn't going to be just Agile at a team level. It was going to be Agile as an end-to-end sort of systemic approach. They also understood that there was a bigger context to this Agile, and that is that it's just a means to an end. This is something we just continually forget as people who live in our Agile bubble, talking to each other, it's about responsiveness, it's about time to market, it's about getting close to your customers, giving your customers a way of engaging with you as a business. So Mark, the CEO of RDT, incredibly entrepreneurial guy, and this was always, in every conversation, you could just see his brain sort of figuring out, so if I did that, then this could do that, and then he was translating this Agile talk back into what could this mean for our customers, and that was a key part of the whole way in which they took it on. So, innovative people. Innovation comes from different places within an organization. It's an elusive characteristic of a company. But to get the most from your people, to give them a space to be innovative, really you're looking at the first, I think, way in which Agile helps this is to give you a stable, cross-functional, long-standing team around which you have multiple perspectives, you've got new ideas coming in all the time, and you've got a sort of solid nucleus that you can bring other people to, particularly when you're bringing people in from outside. So they have doubled in size in their developers and testers, which means that they have brought in quite a few, well, they brought in 25, 30 people in the last 18 months. And bringing those people into a team rather than sort of into an office floor of different developers means that their ideas can be seeded much faster, and you can get the benefit of having those ideas coming in from outside. So that certainly helps the innovative sort of spark at that team level. The whole set of Agile ceremonies, the openness, the recognition that people get, this energizes them. And time and time again, as they were showing what they had done, there was opportunities for stakeholders who again are permanently tuned into the market to sort of see opportunities to take an idea and think of a way of presenting it to the customer. A good example of that was that as part of their testing rig for that ratings hub, which I'll come on to later, they had a performance measure which measured the performance of each sort of iteration versus the previous performances. And they were just doing that for internal purposes because that's what good teams do. But Mark saw this and sort of, hang on, I can show this to the customer, partly to reassure them that it's improving, but partly to show them that you know, this is something sort of real. It's stable and it's working. So something that was essentially an internal thing became part of what, you know, how he then sold it to the customers. What it also meant is that latently within some of these teams, when we started to work with them, it was a traditional development environment. You know, there wasn't any agile. You had project managers sort of wandering around allocating work to different people and so on. And in that sort of slightly chaotic space, you had some quiet people, some people perfectly able, but you know, who would choose not to, or didn't have a forum or a mechanism to sort of get out there and be themselves. And one of the things that was most noticeable was how, and particularly, you know, one individual I'm thinking of, but there was several others within that team environment were able to sort of build their confidence and become sort of leaders in their technology because they worked with the same 5, 6, 7 people day in, day out, and they were talking to them the whole time. So if you're looking for innovative resources or you know, places where innovation and ideas might come from, they may well be in the company already, just residing in some of the quieter people around, and Agile has a way of bringing them forward. At that grassroots, it's a buzzy, engaged environment. Again, one of Mark's sort of things he often says is, before this, it was deathly quiet. You know, you could go in the office and people would be leaving at 5, but whilst they were there, it was very quiet. And you didn't really have a sense of what was going on. Now, if you walk through there, it really is that sort of buzzy place. And that buzziness is an indicator of, at least the possibility of, ideas and perspectives and innovation sort of happening. So, what this all boils down to is culture. You know, the culture of the organization fundamentally changed. In the absence of an alternate structure, you do have this top-down structure. And when you've got an entrepreneurial character, like Mark, but also like some of the other people in the company, it sort of emphasizes that top-down. You know, he's the founder of the company, he makes all the key decisions, etc. You sort of default to this vertical structure. You need to sort of consciously put in place an alternate structure to that, which is what Agile gives you. With that sort of solid team structure and the idea that you're going to protect the team, you give a way in which we can begin to sort of invert or change that default vertical structure. Recruitment was a big part. They grew, but the cost of recruiting. Somebody's in Kent in this office in this room, so they may not agree with that. But that's a quote from Jason, who's Justin, I mean, who spends a lot of time recruiting. And when you're a company that isn't, you know, doing insurance in Kent, and you've got a relatively old technology product, the first version of Landscape was launched in '95. You know, it's actually quite difficult to recruit people. But now with Agile and with new offices and so on, the process of recruitment has got much easier, and staff turnover is reduced. Both of these feed into more innovation. You know, you're bringing more people in, you're bringing better people in, and you're not losing knowledge through less staff turnover. You are going to begin to sort of set the conditions for greater innovation. And naturally, they're a source of great ideas. And as I said, if they're coming into a team, we can extract those ideas from them more quickly than if they were working in an isolated way. That's particularly true of one of the characters who in fact was a contractor, a very strong contractor in a particular area that came in for the ratings hub. Typically, if we hadn't been working in an agile way, he would have been given a very specific task to do with the rating hub, and he would have sat and done it, and then he would have left. 18 months later, he's a relatively expensive contractor for them, but because he's in a team and they're able to sort of get more and more value out of him, he's still there, and his ideas are sort of part of, you know, much broadly adopted within the organization. Technical innovation. So on the technical side, they've, from typically being a .NET sort of shop, Instead, they've gone out, they've looked for libraries, shared libraries, common source, open source libraries and so on. They've gone and adopted ideas like, or products like Chef for automated deployment and orchestration of sort of web-based environments. These are all new technologies for them, and again, a sort of a way of attracting some of the more able talent within Kent. If you're coming into an organisation that's doing all this stuff and going into the cloud, you're going to attract better people. They've done quite a bit of automated testing. They're now hosting their first products in the cloud, in Azure, and they've had to learn, because of their sort of complex code base, some of the more challenging skills, but much more frequent commitments of much smaller sort of segments of code into the shared code base than they were used to. They've also, from a team point of view, so if we're looking for sources of ideas and innovation, a lot of it comes from the team. And in this particular case, there was a way of mapping objects and data from different sources. And their point to the stakeholders was, look, if you give us time, I think it was 3 weeks, for us to try and create a tool that will do this for us, we'll be able to save this amount of time later. That was accepted. And I think there's two things there. One is that the stakeholders trusted them, because the stakeholders for the previous few months had seen things being delivered. But secondly, that there was a sort of collective ability to propose the idea. Again, in a world without that team, somebody may have thought about this. The chances are that one person was going to sort of take time out to make the case for it, and that there would be this forum where they could make a case. Just wouldn't have happened. So having a team where they've sort of talked to each other and said, why don't we sort this out? Why don't we automate this? They could then propose that as a team to the stakeholders. So again, that team structure has, I'd suggest, enabled firstly, the seeing the possibility of this time-saving tool, but then having the collective sort of confidence to propose it. Another key part where the teams got involved was the whole route to live. So that process of taking a product and putting it live was so stressful and so painful that it didn't need management to sort of come down and say, we are going to sort this out. The team itself was very keen to drive this improvement. They could see that the build process was very constrained, it was very manual, and it was pretty much in the head of one guy. And so they also would take those sort of build skills and try and develop and take them back up into the team. So if we're going to give it a name, it's sort of that DevOpsy type of attitude, but again, not something that was proposed from above. This is innovation as well. Innovation isn't just customer-facing products and so on. It's how do we solve our internal problems and get them, so that we're saving ourselves hassle and stress. What it also does, those sort of challenges, is that it gives sort of a reason for different parts of the organisation. So they have a few people in Halifax, they have a few people in Adelaide, but the whole challenge of how do we package things smaller, how do we test them, how do we deploy them automatically, meant that they had to talk to each other about different aspects of the solution. So that was another sort of bottom-up factor. Customer-facing innovation was really quite profound as well. This is the only picture I have. It's not terribly happy, but that was actually at a workshop with a brand new customer, a big insurance company. Historically, you would have sent the BA in and possibly the sort of account manager, and we would have had months or certainly weeks and a few months of toing and froing of requirements and so on. And for the first time here, we started to run story workshops from day one. So in they go, this was all done over a sort of a week or two, and using sort of story mapping for those of you familiar with the layout, but basically story writing workshops as a way of getting the requirements. it changed the relationships quite fundamentally as well. After building the ratings hub for a particular client, the client was so pleased and for various reasons, for many reasons, and basically said, well, can we just have that team? You know, that team's a good team. You know, they've built what we wanted. I think can we have that team? Mark, entrepreneurial to a fault, said absolutely. You know, the team's yours. Have it for a year, and you know, pay us, and you can feed that. You can give that team whatever work you want for that team. Now, from a business point of view, that's a huge step change in the nature of their business. You know, they've been, up until that point, they're contractually driven. You know, they're looking for opportunities, they're looking to close big deals, they're looking to manage BAU and make money from BAU. But there's quite a lot of overhead to all of that, sort of contracting and so on. And instead, having a big insurance company come and buy a team and effectively pay for it for a year changes things quite a lot. From a leadership point of view, you can basically cover those costs and more, and you can move on and sort of focus on your other sort of newer products. They also are moving increasingly from being sort of cost-based, so when they were asked to do a change to the core product, it was often, well, how many days is that? Okay, so that's such and so much money. Now they're sort of looking at it going, well, that doesn't make much sense, because that cost never really reflected the added complexity that those changes were putting in the code base. So they were always underquoting on the cost side, but they were also underselling themselves on the value side. Now that doesn't come from Agile necessarily, but it does, it sort of became one of the questions that we sort of began to ask, which is, what is the true cost of actually doing all these tweaks and changes to the application? And the future, well, it's still a very dynamic marketplace and changing. And at the moment, the way that the product goes is that it gets sort of wrapped up and built and put on a FTP server ready for the customer to take it. But from then on, the customer has to sort of take it into their environment and do all the testing and automation and get it live. The problem with that is the customers, it's very expensive for them to do that at the moment because it's very manual. And so as a result, they'll only do that once or twice a year. They don't want any more than that. But the problem, again, if we're looking at Agile from this end-to-end perspective, you know, what is the end of our product? It's not sitting on an RDT FTP server. You know, the end is when it's actually live in the environment of our customer. So how do we tackle that last part of the challenge? And so if we're writing now increasingly more and more automated tests inside our environments, why don't we take those automated tests and offer them to our customers and have them use the same tests within their environments? And why don't we, as a sort of new line of business, go to them and help them install it in their environment? So that's another innovative sort of step forward, enabled by having all this automation. You know, it wouldn't help much if you didn't have the automation. You just said, well, can we send one of our guys over to help you install this and do it manually? The customer's not going to want to do it any more frequently than they're doing it today. So that's an innovative change. Likewise, if you've gone into the cloud and you've got a system that is relatively modular, you know, why wouldn't you begin to look at using it software as a service? So that step into the cloud of their ratings hub, which they sort of now understand quite a bit about the cloud, they can begin to think of software as a service. Engaging the clients has been and continues to be a challenge. You know, how do you sell scope to traditionally conservative clients who sort of think they know exactly what they want right at the beginning? And how do you start to sell them the idea of dynamic scope and work with them? Likewise, on the contracting side, if they're asking for you to estimate how long is it going to cost you or take you to put this thing in, you know, what is just enough estimating? You know, we don't want to be going, you know, force down the by the nature of our contract with our customer, we don't want to be forced into more and more detailed estimating and design. So a couple of sort of challenges that you sort of share with we've shared with the clients and trying to sort of work out what is the right, and we don't have the answer to this yet. You know, you've got your cost of estimating, and you've got your accuracy, and at some point it begins to flatten out. But what is that point? You know, we don't know yet. We've had 3 clients come through this process in the last year or so, and on each of them it hasn't quite been right. But you know, that remains one of the challenges. On the scope side of things, it's a slightly different discussion. That represents a sort of portfolio level backlog of the sort of things that the client has asked for, different aspects of policy management, for example. And so the first thing we typically would do with them is, partly as a result of the story workshops, is to come back with a much more finely grained backlog of features and slices of products and so on. And then, given that they have a budget, you know, the conversation turns into one of, well, how far down this backlog does my £1 million get me? So we can put in a probable area, and we can put in a possible. So right from the very beginning, we're talking about ranges of possibility. We're factoring in, or we're making transparent that we don't know how far down this backlog we're going to get. And you, customer, actually are quite a key part of determining how far we get down to possible. You know, if you are more available and you're part of the process, we're going to be able to get further down the backlog if you sign things off quicker and get questions. But if you insist that you want an absolute line drawn in the backlog, then we can do that. But we're going to have to put it up here because you're asking us to take more risk, and so you know we're going to offer you less. Now, for the first time, in a very simple way, you can start to explain to the customer how their insistence on an absolute guaranteed delivery is actually not in their interest, because they're losing the possibility of this extra functionality. What it also means is, because we've run it in a workshop environment, we've actually come up with a whole lot of other ideas that fit below this line. So £1 million, even at the best case scenario, is only going to get us this far down the backlog. But by having a backlog like this, it means that we could show you, you know, if you did have a little bit more money, possibly we could go a little bit further down this backlog. So this is a way of opening up the discussion and putting new possibilities on the table when you're engaging with the customer. And it's been quite enlightening. It's been a source of conversation, which is what you hope for it. It means that you know we're not sort of fixated on a single design spec with a single contract and a single amount and a single delivery date. You know, we're already talking about the fact that there's stuff we don't know, but you know we can influence. So the next the sort of slides are really about the product side of things. So you know, what products did we innovate, and what was the product innovation? So the Ratings Hub, there was a very distinct opportunity out there, and it wasn't an opportunity that suddenly came to light last year. It had been around for 2 or 3 years before, but they just couldn't get to it because they were busy on the BAU stuff. But really, the opportunity is out there. A significant number of policies are wrongly priced on the websites when you go and get your quote, because at that point the person giving you the quote couldn't check up on various things like your credit history. They gave you a quote, and then when it was sort of looked at by the actual insurance company, they came to realise that actually, given your credit history, that's too cheap, so we're going to withdraw the offer. Now that's a lot of waste and unhappy customers and so on. You've also got quite a lot of fraudulent claims, you know, high levels of fraudulent claims, fraudulent applications for policies, not claims, also going on as well. So there's a real need for this, and increasingly, you know, we have systems that are much more consumer-facing. We all probably buy our insurance online now, and we go to comparison sites all the time. So the nature of the way these things are bought. But also insurance companies, as the products get more sort of intricate and more sort of complicated, and people are wanting quotes in milliseconds, you know, some of those insurance companies at some point go, we're not going to keep a ratings hub, we're not going to do our own ratings, we want to use somebody else's ratings hub that scales and, you know, has that enriched data behind it. So more, we have, I don't think they've yet got anybody replacing their own internal systems yet, but that's where that product could go to. And the idea just got stalled because of BAU. So, set up the Pathfinder team, job, deliver, learn fast, and really to prove that Agile could work within RDT. And that's the value of a Pathfinder approach. You know, if there are people, and there always will be, that are unconvinced by this, you know, this is the iterative way, the incremental way to learn whether Agile works for you. It was worth taking this approach because the product had to significantly change direction. It started on a bit of a hunch that, you know, this could work. They started talking to 3 customers, but none of those customers early on were ready to actually commit to buying it. So only when one of them finally committed and sort of helped to reprioritize quite a bit of the backlog, could the product then go in the direction for that customer. So another way in which Agile helps innovation, you know, you can set off not knowing exactly where you're going, which is sort of almost the definition of innovation, and then you get your bit of feedback and proper decision, and you're able to go in a different direction because you've been hopefully, you know, achieving your definition of done, you've closed out the work you've been doing, you don't have threads and threads of work all over the place that stop you from changing direction. You've got a backlog with tradable units within it, so you can sort of suddenly reprioritize things. You can do that visibly with the clients, and so on. So you've got a mechanism there that actually allows a client to, with you, reorientate the product. So another key enabler of innovation. They took a piece of IP that they obviously had very deep in their product. It was one of the sort of oldest parts of their product, and able to completely repurpose it. Didn't rewrite it all, but much of it was rewritten in order for it to work on the hub, on the internet. And the product, as it was put out there, had to back end into several other systems because it needed to get data to enrich the quote. And time and again, the client would say that the RDT team was the most able to deliver on time and most transparent and so on. So that was an important win again. So it was delivered in 5 months. It enriches quotes with credit history, electoral data, floodplains and stuff. And at the moment, it does 10 million quotes a day. Now, this product didn't exist. Well, that's 12 months ago, it didn't exist. And it wasn't, wasn't part of the portfolio of products at RDT. And now it does, and it's quite attention grabbing. You know, you go to some of these big clients and you talk now about this, and suddenly they're sort of wanting to talk to you in a different way. It's a totally new line of business. They're talking to 7 new possible clients now as a result of that. But it's also totally new. They get a transaction from a charge from every transaction. They also now know how to put high quality, scalable solutions into the cloud, which isn't something that many of their competitors can do. How Agile helps? That single focus team. And I just emphasize and re-emphasize the focus bit. You know, there was absolutely no way they could have made headway on this product had they had to deal with the BAU and the interruptions and all those sorts of change requests and all that. Even though that generated money, they had to be protected from that. The backlog, so even though it was unknowable right at the beginning, the backlog enabled them to start. And the fact that they were able to deliver end-to-end working slices meant they could keep their stakeholders calm, but there was also something tangible to show to clients. So you weren't trying to just sell clients on an idea, you were actually showing them early prototypes of this thing working. and very high quality. It's had one bug in 12 months, and that was some sort of esoteric caching bug. It wasn't, it was something strange. So that's how it helped. There was a second product that they developed, which was a flexible, scripted data capture sort of workflow thing for call centers. This was slightly different at the beginning. They really weren't sure what they were building. And the client just went over budget, and there was quite difficult conversations with the client, leading to quite a bit of descoping and so on. And this is the other side of innovation. It's not all sort of happy and just it all goes well. You know, you do end up in these quite tricky, sticky situations with your clients. And I would suggest that in that particular case, without the credit that they had got from delivering it with the client and being so transparent, when they did hit those sticky patches, it would have been a lot worse if they had been working in a traditional way. But as it is, they developed quite a bit of new technology around AngularJS, which is the Google JavaScript library. They also around testing. Right, so what are the takeaways? The first thing for just focusing on the condition sides that Agile provides, you've got teams, the space for the team, the visualization, the whole sort of sense that multiple perspectives and the idea generation that gives us. There's the whole sense of trust that we get from delivering frequently, having those conversations, and that means we're able to take slightly bigger risks with our ideas. And if you're going to innovate, you need to have some way of taking risks, small ones. Strong management support, and I don't just mean management support in the sort of, here's the money, go away and do it. They were in that daily. In fact, one of the founders of the company became the product owner of that team, and was moved out of his office and went and sat with the team, and there was daily sort of interaction and at the demos and so on. So really active interaction. This activation of the grassroots, this sense of trusting them, giving them a space, getting them to talk to each other, facilitating with a Scrum Master, that's a key condition for innovation. You need to have all the brains in that team actively engaged in the process. Focus. As I said before, this couldn't have happened if they hadn't been able to focus uninterrupted by the business. Going into a project not knowing what you're going to deliver is again the definition of innovation. You don't know what you're going to deliver, but it does require people to accept that we don't know. And I don't know how you get that. In this case, we got it because of the people involved, but you're not always going to have that one. And then the idea that we can self-generate, we can generate ideas within the team itself. So on the mechanism side of Agile, it gives us these mechanisms. So with our stable teams, we've got this creative cauldron of ideas and of people working together. We don't have to rely on some sort of evil genius coming up with ideas and sort of putting them in, even if he looks slightly less bald. That's Mark. We can use the backlog. It's dynamic. It allows us to sort of change our mind. It's highly visible, and that's, I think, a key enabler. We've got our demos cooked into all flavors of Agile, I think, and that builds trust. It gives us a way to engage the customer, which is otherwise very difficult to do. That customer, if they start to see things being delivered, they're with you. The automation and the quality and the confidence that it gives you to sort of move a little bit faster. That definition of done is key. So again, fundamental to Scrum and most of Agile. If everything we've done to date is fully tested and integration tested, if we need to change direction, we can. If it isn't fully tested, if it isn't finished, if it isn't done, it's actually quite difficult to change direction in where we're going. So it makes us less responsive. And those sparse requirements mean that we talk to each other and we're open to emergent opportunities. So again, Agile gives us a mechanism. So I had to speed up for the last little bit, but there's still 5 minutes left. Questions? Thoughts?
involved with RDTs? Did they find you, or did you find them?
They found us through an investor who was wanting to invest in it, who knew us from somewhere else. So, yeah.
You said you've got multiple offices there, across various places on there. Now, with these, was the Agile innovation you brought in applied to all offices, or was it just the singular office down in Kent?
The Kent office was by far the biggest. The Halifax office, it was its own team, and so they came after the Pathfinder was in Kent, and then the Halifax one was one of the sort of, I think they've got 5-6 teams now, and it's really one of the follow-on teams.
So do they follow the same,
they follow the same
ideals that you've got here as well?
Yeah, they follow the same process. Well, what's interesting about this is that it wasn't, other than the Agile ones, there wasn't a sort of a particular innovation ideal. The innovation has sort of fallen out of this or arisen because of it. It was always there, it was just kept under the sort of damp blanket of BAU. So take that away and the innovation sort of started to happen. I don't know, I haven't worked with them for about 9 months, but I think on the Halifax side, I'm not sure which of these products they were particularly involved in. I think they were doing something slightly different.
I just wonder how much that different locations actually inhibits the ability to do the Agile so much, because they're all working together.
Yeah, it certainly it doesn't help. I mean, everyone will tell you that, and it's not ideal. But if it is a team, and I think there were 5 people up there, and the product owner was down in Kent and would go up there every 2 weeks to sort of work with them for a day or two. So we're in the same time zone. We've got a relatively discrete piece of work that they're working on. So it wasn't as difficult as some teams that are sort of broken up.
One more question?
What are your top tips to building trust with the customer? Because it obviously requires quite a lot of trust, doesn't it?
I think it's the delivery part. Well, it's how you start the conversation, I think, with some of this. And sometimes it's luck, but I think actually in quite a few customers now, there's people that are attuned to this possibility. And certainly one of their big customers, an Australian customer, there was a character in there who wanted to work in this way, so that helped a lot. But in the new customer where they ran that first story workshop, they didn't know about Agile. And it's not too difficult to sell the idea to a customer. The bit that tends to trip you up is that part around the contracting and what are we going to get for our £1 million. So that needs to be taken through. But the idea that we're going to show you something every 2 weeks, that you're going to be able to change your mind, that you can come in and visit the team, that this team is dedicated to you, they're not working on 5 other teams, and all of that, the customer's just going to sign up to, one by one by one. That's not difficult to sell at all. The trust, I think, only comes from, it comes from the transparency. They can see the backlog, they can see what's going in, they can see what's coming out. But it's that delivery. If you can show them that you've built something every 2 weeks, that's what the customer can build the trust slowly out of.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Basil. Thank you very much. Right, you're nearly free to go. There's a panel.